The midday sun beat down mercilessly over the jagged Colorado foothills, turning the dust into a haze that shimmered like heat off a forge. Clara squinted against the glare, pressing herself into the shadow of a weathered boulder. Her heart hammered and every nerve was taut, with the kind of tension that comes from knowing she was seconds away from danger. She had been trailing Garrus and his gang for days, pretending to be another drifter moving through the territory. They didn't know she was a reporter, or that she had come armed only with a notebook and a keen sense of survival. She had stumbled upon their secret too close to their hidden gold. And tonight, or maybe even now, they were ready to eliminate the problem. The mine had been abandoned for decades, a relic of fevered dreams and forgotten labor. Wooden scaffolding rose like skeletal fingers. Some boards rotted through, others barely clinging. Dust motes swirled in the shafts of sunlight that pierced the darkness, and the faint echo of wind through the tunnel made it feel alive, as if the earth itself were watching her. Clara could hear the gang arguing above, their voices carried by the wind, sharp and raw, full of greed and frustration. She crouched low, keeping her breathing shallow, counting her blessings that the gang hadn't noticed her yet. Her plan had been simple: watch, document, and wait for an opening. But in her naivety, she hadn't anticipated Garrus spotting the movement behind a boulder near the cliff's edge. 1 second she was scribbling mental notes, noting the position of the stolen gold. The next, she felt rough hands gripping her arms. The struggle was brief but brutal. Clara screamed, thrashing with a desperation she didn't know she possessed. Garrus's sneer was a cruel slash against her panic as he shoved her forward. "You think you can follow us and live, little girl?" He growled, and the words were punctuated by the cracking sound of her foot hitting a rotten plank. The ground gave way under her in a sudden, terrifying collapse. She fell into darkness, her stomach lurching as she plummeted, a scream tearing from her throat. The fall seemed to last forever. Dirt and pebbles rained down around her as she tried to grasp at something, anything, to slow her descent. Pain shot through her ankle as she landed on a jagged ledge, the impact stealing the air from her lungs. A spray of dust and rocks buried her partially, her hair matted to her face, dirt coating every inch of her skin. She coughed violently, trying to clear the choking debris from her lungs, and realized with a jolt that she was trapped, dangling on a narrow ledge above an abyss she couldn't see the bottom of. Panic threatened to take her over. But Clara forced herself to focus, think, breathe, survive her. Hands clawed at the rough walls of the pit, scraping against sharp stone, trying to find a foothold that wasn't there. She tried to gauge how far down the drop went, but darkness swallowed everything. Beyond a few feet, the shadows seemed alive, pressing in on her, whispering threats that weren't real, but felt undeniably true. Above, Garrus and his gang were celebrating their cruelty, confident that she was finished. Their laughter echoed down into the pit, bitter and mocking. Clara's stomach twisted as the realization hit. If help didn't come, if no one came for her, she was alone in this dark, unforgiving place. And yet she couldn't give in. Her hands were bleeding, her legs trembled, but her mind stayed sharp. She scanned the ledge, looking for anything to stabilize herself, to buy her a little more time. Then she heard it. First, she thought it was the wind, some trick of her desperate mind, a distant, deliberate sound that didn't belong to the chaos above. The metallic clink of hooves striking rock. The rhythm was steady, unyielding, approaching with purpose. Clara froze, every muscle taut, heart pounding against her ribcage. Could it be? Could someone have followed her without her knowing? The silhouette of a lone rider appeared against the horizon, framed by the burning afternoon sun. Broad shoulders, hat tilted low, eyes hidden beneath the brim. He scanned the area, calculating. Clara's breath hitched. The rancher. She remembered the stories, quiet, solitary, rarely speaking. The kind of man who measured his actions instead of his words. He had been a shadow in the valley for years, seen and unseen, and yet here he was, descending from the ridge with the precision of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. He dismounted without a word, boots crunching on gravel and broken earth as he approached the edge of the pit. Clara's pulse raced. How close could he get? How would he save her from the gang above? From the pit, from the sharp rocks waiting below? Then she noticed the lasso in his hands, coiled neatly at his saddle. He tested it with his fingers, his gaze flicking to her, measuring. Garrus's gang faltered as they noticed him. The laughter stopped. Surprise etched across their rough faces. No one had expected this silent man to intervene. No one had dared challenge them. Not until now. Clara felt a surge of hope, a fragile thing that made her chest tighten. The rancher was lowering the rope toward her, methodical, patient. "Hold on!" he called, voice low and steady, cutting through the chaos like a blade. Clara grabbed the rope with both hands, her palms scraped and raw, her knuckles white from the grip. The coarse fibers bit into her skin, but she didn't care. He was here. He could save her. The gang shouted from above, threats mingling with shouts of disbelief. But the rancher didn't flinch. He moved closer to the edge, careful, unhurried, a stark contrast to the panic and cruelty above. Clara clutched the rope tighter, trying to steady her shaking legs, the rope swaying slightly as it lowered deeper into the shadows. She realized then that he might not just be helping her out, he might be going down into the pit himself. And when she looked into his eyes, she saw no hesitation, no fear, only resolve. The kind of resolve that made legends in the valleys, that made enemies pause and reconsider their choices. Clara's hope surged. She knew she wasn't going to be left behind. And as the sun blazed overhead, casting long shadows across the cliff, the rancher prepared to descend, not with a shout, not with a flourish, but with the silent, unstoppable determination that had earned him his reputation. Clara's pulse matched the rhythm of the rope, the creaking of the wood, the distant laughter now fading into alarm. Somehow she knew the story wasn't over, far from it. Clara's hands were raw and bleeding from gripping the coarse rope, but she held on with every ounce of strength she had left. Her legs trembled violently, threatened by the cold and exhaustion, but the rancher's calm presence beside her anchored her in a way nothing else could. When he finally made the move, stepping over the edge with a quiet determination, she felt a rush of fear mixed with awe. He didn't hesitate, didn't pause to calculate. He simply descended, each foot finding purchase on the narrow ledges with an uncanny precision, the rope steady between his hands. "Keep steady," he said, his voice low and measured. It wasn't a command so much as a promise, and Clara clung to it like a lifeline. Every step down the treacherous ledge seemed impossibly dangerous, each loose rock threatening to betray them. Dust cascaded past them, falling in tiny avalanches that made her stomach twist. But the rancher moved like he had walked this pit 100 times before. Clara's eyes darted around, taking in the walls of the pit, jagged and unforgiving. Shadows danced across the rough stone, twisted by the harsh light from above. She could hear the gang shouting from the top, their voices tinged with disbelief and rage. "Get her! Don't let her escape!" Garrus's words rang out, but they sounded far away, powerless against the focused determination of the rancher beside her. He reached her ledge with careful steps, landing with a controlled thud that sent a small cloud of dust into the air. For a moment they just looked at each other, eyes locking. She could see the faintest smirk tugging at his lips, the kind of expression that promised safety but carried the weight of unspoken warning. His hands extended, gripping the rope in a practiced way that promised he would not let go. "Grab my arm," he instructed quietly. Clara wrapped her arms around him, her fingers digging into the fabric of his shirt. The texture was rough but familiar somehow, a grounding presence in the chaos. He shifted slightly, testing her weight and their combined balance, and then motioned toward the next ledge below. Step by step they descended together, the rancher guiding her with small, precise movements that minimized the danger of slipping. Each rock beneath their boots groaned, threatened to crumble, but his confidence never wavered. Clara couldn't help but marvel at the sheer control he had over his surroundings. He wasn't a man who fought recklessly. He calculated, anticipated, and executed with a quiet mastery that left no room for error. Halfway down, a larger rock shifted beneath Clara's foot, sending a tremor through the rope. She gasped, clutching the rancher's arm desperately, expecting to plummet into the darkness. His grip was immediate, unyielding, and his calm voice cut through her panic. "I've got you. Don't fight it, just follow me." The reassurance, simple as it was, steadied her heart. Slowly, cautiously, they moved past the unstable section, every step a small victory against gravity and fear. Below them, the pit widened slightly, revealing the jagged remnants of the old mine tunnels. The faint smell of earth and damp stone filled Clara's nostrils. She could see the faint outline of a lower ledge where she had landed during her fall, and the rancher guided her there with gentle but firm direction. She crouched as he tested the ledge with his own weight first, then gestured for her to follow. "You ready?" he asked, voice low, not impatient, just matter of fact. Clara nodded, gripping the rope with renewed determination. Step by step she moved alongside him, her trust in this silent man absolute. There was no time for hesitation. One misstep could mean certain death. The gang's shouts had grown frantic now, their arrogance replaced by a creeping sense of dread. They had underestimated the quiet rancher, and it was beginning to show. Finally, they reached a narrow section that led to the bottom of the pit. Clara's arms shook violently, but the rancher positioned himself to support her weight. "Lean on me," he instructed. She did, her body pressed against his, and together they edged forward until the soft dirt beneath their boots replaced the sharp stone. She exhaled a long, shaky breath that carried away some of the fear she had held for what felt like hours. The rancher didn't celebrate, didn't relax his guard. His eyes scanned the surroundings, alert for any sign of movement above. He motioned for Clara to stand behind him as he assessed the safest route out of the pit. Above, Garris and his gang had abandoned the edge, fearful now, uncertain. Their shouts were replaced by angry whispers, the frustration of losing control evident in every tone. "Come on," he said finally, nodding toward a narrow tunnel that led out of the pit. Clara followed, careful not to stumble on the uneven ground. Each step was deliberate, measured, as the rancher led the way. The tunnel was tight, the air thick with dust and the scent of old stone. She could hear her own heartbeat, loud and insistent in the silence that surrounded them. They emerged at last into the open sunlight, dirt-covered and battered, but alive. Clara's legs gave way slightly, and the rancher caught her, steadying her with a firm but gentle grip. She looked up at him, expecting words of reassurance, maybe even praise, but he offered none of that. Instead, he tipped his hat slightly, the faintest smirk still playing at the corner of his mouth. "You're lucky," he said simply. The simplicity of the statement carried more weight than any long-winded speech ever could. Clara's chest heaved as she absorbed the moment. She realized then that the rancher didn't need to speak volumes. His actions had said everything. He had gone down into a dark, dangerous pit without hesitation, risking his own life to save hers. Above them, the gang had retreated, powerless to act. They shouted threats and curses, but their words fell flat against the silent, stoic presence of the rancher. He mounted his horse with a single fluid motion, swinging his leg over the saddle and settling in as though nothing had happened. Clara watched, awestruck, as he nudged the horse forward, moving away from the pit and the chaos that had almost consumed them. The sun cast long shadows behind him, the dust from the trail swirling like a veil. Clara realized that she had witnessed something rare, a hero who didn't need to announce his deeds, whose strength and courage were measured not in words, but in unwavering action. She straightened, dusting herself off, the fear slowly giving way to a profound sense of gratitude and respect. Garris and his gang were left shouting into the wind, their threats meaningless, against a man who had already vanished beyond the horizon. Clara knew she would never forget this day, the terror, the darkness, and ultimately the calm, fearless figure who had descended into the pit and emerged victorious. The rancher had shown her that sometimes silence spoke louder than words, and courage could be measured not by noise, but by the quiet certainty of action. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the foothills in hues of gold and amber, Clara took a deep breath. She had survived the fall, survived the pit, and survived the men who had thought they could control her fate. And somewhere ahead, riding steadily into the distance, was the silent rancher, a man whose actions had saved her life, and whose presence would haunt her awe-filled memory forever.